Generational talent is different. Who are generationally talented quarterbacks to you?
I mean, present day or college kids?
If you go present
like in
day,
the NFL?
In the NFL, who's a
Lamar.
He ain't Lamar.
I'm not saying he's Lamar.
But it's the other thing, though. The people you're comparing him to, right? Like, let's just talk about the people you're comparing him to. You know what Lamar Jackson had by this point in college? A Heisman.
But Lamar played a lot more. He had stopped.
Because he was that good.
RC, Lamar's first start, he went 9 of 20 with a pick.
This is third start. Stop saying it's
against a real opponent.
It's his third.
Against a real opponent.
And also, too.
Okay, so we can go
to year in college.
But he hasn't played bowling.
Because you know why? Because if you're Trevor Lawrence and you're a transcendent, generational quarterback talent, Kelly Bryant can be the incumbent starter.
Ryan Clark just went absolutely nuclear on Dan Orlovsky, and the result was pure, unadulterated, on-air chaos. Apparently, Dan had the sheer audacity to fire a preemptive strike at Shedeur Sanders before the Lions had even hit the field, and in response, Ryan Clark launched into an unfiltered, no-holds-barred takedown. This was not just a simple disagreement between analysts. This was a public roast. It was a brutal clapback, and it was a full-blown football freakout, all rolled into one explosive package. So grab your popcorn, because if you ever thought pre-game drama was a boring affair, you need to think again. This right here is the stuff of straight-up on-air legend.
Things got real heated in the ESPN studios as Ryan Clark completely destroyed Dan Orlovsky over his Arch Manning generational take. Now, we've seen Dan Orlovsky's bad take on Shedeur Sanders, and Ryan Clark has had enough. But we're gonna, guys, man, I'm here to tell you, man, it seems like Ryan Clark has had enough of Dan Orlovsky's bad takes when it comes to these quarterbacks. Now, we all seen and we've all heard Dan Orlovsky's take on Shedeur Sanders. We also seen him compare Dylan Gabriel to Shedeur Sanders.
And if you are enjoying this raw, unfiltered chaos, you need to subscribe to the channel because it helps more than you think. The ESPN studio may never fully recover from the absolute detonation that just occurred live on air, because Ryan Clark didn't just step onto the battlefield of debate, he brought a full-scale nuclear strike with him. And who was standing at ground zero on the receiving end of this verbal assault? None other than Dan Orlovsky, the quarterback analyst whose entire questionable career of lukewarm takes was just publicly and brutally vaporized for the entire world to witness.
100%.
Can you define to me what that means?
Well, generational talent would be that you have physical attributes that are rare and unique. When did 6'4", 225 pounds, 4'5", 4'6" in the 40?
None of those things.
100%. He's 100% 6'4", 220 plus pounds, and is like 4'5", 4'6", and 40. Got clocked at 21 miles an hour on GPS. When did that not become at the quarterback spot generational physical ability, let alone elite, rare bloodlines when it comes to the quarterback position?
And the entire unscripted meltdown all began with a seemingly routine discussion about whether or not Arch Manning is truly generational. Sounds innocent enough, right? Absolutely, unequivocally wrong. This was supposed to be a polite, professional, on-air debate about player potential and media hype, but what actually unfolded was a descent into pure, glorious chaos.
Chance Dan Orlovsky gets, he keeps on bigging up Arch Manning to make Arch Manning one of the greatest quarterbacks he's seen in college history. Now, there's a long list of quarterbacks that we can talk about in college that was great. But the thing about it is Dan Orlovsky's takes on these quarterbacks, because Dan Orlovsky was a quarterback himself. And like I stated to you guys, man, Dan Orlovsky likes mediocrity. He likes mediocre players, because he was a mediocre quarterback himself. And Dan Orlovsky takes on these quarterbacks is downright asinine. And Ryan Clark wastes no time in destroying everything that he has to say about these quarterbacks.
Dan Orlovsky, bless his heart, immediately jumped onto the Arch Manning hype train with the unbridled enthusiasm of a small child who has just discovered candy for the very first time. Arch Manning, he passionately declared, is the next big thing, a generational talent, the future of football, and all the while, Ryan Clark just sat there, silently watching him, a wry smile spreading across his face as he was likely thinking to himself, oh, you are about to do it now, aren't you?
Generational talent? Then who is? And how are we measuring it? Because we can't sit there and go, because of the way the first start on the road.
There's very few of them. I think there's less than what you think. I think John Elway was a generational talent. I think Patrick Mahomes is a generational talent. I don't think Tom Brady, I don't think Drew Brees, I don't think Peyton Manning are generational talents. I think Andrew Luck ended up being a generational talent. I don't think there's a ton of them out there.
But so then what? Then how does one, in your eyes, be a generational talent? Because there's not a lot of difference.
You are about to cross the imaginary line of reality, and I'm going to enjoy every single delicious second of this. And then Ryan Clark did what he does best. He completely exposed the entire flawed system that allows mediocre former quarterbacks to dictate who is considered elite and who is branded as overrated. Let's properly set the stage. Orlovsky starts rattling off a series of physical stats like a kid reciting a grocery list. 6'4", 225 pounds, runs 21 miles per hour on GPS. Clark, as calm and collected as ever, stops him right there and drops an absolute truth bomb. You don't need a speedometer on a quarterback, he declared, to know if he can dominate on the field. He then delivered the knockout blow. Arch Manning running the football is not the same as Lamar Jackson turning defenders into pretzels. And in that single devastating moment, you could almost see Dan Orlovsky's soul quietly exit his body. The pure, unadulterated genius of Ryan Clark's response is not just in the numbers, it is in the underlying principle. Mediocre quarterbacks love mediocrity. That's practically science. They see themselves reflected in average performances. They mistake raw potential for actual proven talent, and they feel a deep, almost primal compulsion to defend hype over substance. Dan Orlovsky has spent years doing exactly that. He consistently downgrades quarterbacks who are actually elite and props up unproven prospects, all while acting as if he is the sole gatekeeper of generational greatness. And Ryan Clark, he just walked in with a sledgehammer and completely dismantled the entire gate. But let's be real here, this was never just about Arch Manning, although he was certainly the bait on the hook.
In fact, RC, I thought you described it very well in our meeting this morning, what it is they are and aren't doing.
Yeah, what it is that they're doing is they're treating Shedeur Sanders like a fifth-round pick. Right? We're not covering every fifth-round pick in the NFL hoping that he gets an opportunity to be the starter on day one. We felt like, oh my goodness, they got a diamond in the rough. Shedeur Sanders fell to the fifth round. They felt like they evaluated him there, and that's where they picked him. And they're playing.
No, the real, unspoken victim in this entire exchange was Shedeur Sanders, the one quarterback who has been relentlessly proving himself at every single level, who has been carrying entire programs on his back, and who is still getting casually shrugged at by a class of analysts who wouldn't recognize elite, generational talent if it literally hit them in the face. And Ryan Clark didn't even have to mention Shedeur's name directly. By completely tearing apart Dan Orlovsky's flimsy, stat-based logic, he highlighted the exact flawed reasoning for why guys like Shedeur get chronically underrated, while three-star wonders with the right last name get instantly labeled as generational. And now, here's where it gets truly spicy. Ryan Clark starts directly calling out Orlovsky's very credibility, and then comes the one single line that will live in sports media infamy forever. I don't care what this little vest you wear on top of your nipples says. Boom, mic dropped. The sheer, breathtaking absurdity of Dan Orlovsky just sitting there, desperately trying to defend his numbers, his analytics, and his hype, all while being completely and utterly obliterated by pure logic and lived experience, is almost cartoonish. It is like watching a guy meticulously build a sandcastle right before a tsunami hits. Only the tsunami in this case is Ryan Clark, and he has brought receipts, and those receipts are absolutely devastating. Clark then points to real generational quarterbacks: Trevor Lawrence, Caleb Williams, Lamar Jackson. These are players who force immediate seismic change. They do not wait their turn. They do not sit behind backups and collect likes on Instagram. They dominate. They transform entire teams. They make coaches, coaches and fans, and especially analysts, eat their own words. And then there is Shedeur Sanders, walking into programs like Jackson State and Colorado, completely flipping the script, and somehow he is still being talked down to. It is absurd. It is infuriating.
Stop with the Shedeur Sanders is being set up to fail narrative. Who do you want to start the game? It's preseason week 1. First option, Joe Flacco. He's played for like 20 years. He's not going to start preseason week 1. The next 2 options would be a Kenny Pickett or a Dylan Gabriel. Both are dealing with hamstring injuries. Neither has practiced a ton recently. If they've done anything, I believe it's been 7-on-7. Who do you want to start the game? The next 2 options are Shedeur and Snoop Huntley. Shedeur's been there.
And it is absolutely hilarious if you are just watching Dan Orlovsky squirm on live television. Here is where the sarcasm levels officially hit critical mass. Orlovsky then pathetically tries to explain away the narrative gap by bringing up NIL money, as if that is a legitimate reason a quarterback cannot assert their dominance on the field. Ryan Clark doesn't even flinch. Generational talent, he explains, does not wait for contracts. It does not negotiate with mediocrity. It rises, it forces decisions, and it makes people acknowledge it, whether they like it or not. And Shedeur Sanders has done exactly that. Coaches have had absolutely no choice but to adapt to his immense presence. Entire programs have been elevated, and fans suddenly care about teams that were completely and utterly irrelevant just last season. Meanwhile, Dan Orlovsky is still clutching his little vest, measuring speed, and desperately trying to justify hype over actual tangible production. The sheer beauty of this on-air moment is that Ryan Clark didn't just defend Shedeur, he exposed a whole rotten systemic problem in sports media. Analysts like Orlovsky create these flimsy narratives that are based on bloodlines, on hype, and on their own personal biases. They consistently mistake raw potential for proven skill, and they prop up players who have a zero track record of success, while simultaneously tearing down those who consistently perform at elite levels. And it is not subtle, it is glaring, it is embarrassing. And Ryan Clark, he makes dismantling that entire flawed system look completely and utterly effortless. Just imagine being Dan Orlovsky at that moment. You have spent your entire career analyzing quarterbacks, throwing around stats like they are confetti, and then suddenly a former NFL player who actually knows what high-level play looks like starts calling out every single glaring flaw in your entire methodology. You start trying to backtrack, you mention different eras, you throw in a bunch of excuses about the level of competition or NIL deals, but it is already far, far too late. Your entire narrative is crumbling in real time.
Your moves slowly kind of trying to see what's going on, and then that creates that sack fumble. So a lot of the stuff that we just saw in college is a big deal. This ball gets snapped at the 48-yard line. Defense has won the rep. Play is dead. Throw the ball away. It's first down. But instead we run and it's a 2.5, 3-yard loss. So instead of being 2nd and 10, we're 2nd and 13. We're dead. Again, here's the opportunity to throw the juke route. Hold, scramble. So some of those things that I was and others were concerned about on the college tape showed itself again. This is not the end of the world, though. This is part of his development in becoming a potential starting quarterback.
The entire national audience is watching. Your professional credibility is evaporating faster than a snowflake in the midday sun, and yet the comedy just keeps on flowing. Ryan Clark doesn't just hit the numbers, he hits the core, unassailable logic. If Arch Manning is being seriously considered generational based on just 3 career starts, then what does that say about the entire evaluation process for guys who have consistently and repeatedly proven themselves? Shedeur Sanders doesn't just have to show up in the highlights to prove his worth. The stats are there, the wins are there, and the clutch game-winning plays are there. He elevates entire programs instantly, and yet the media machine, it just looks the other way, endlessly hyping the hype while completely minimizing the reality. The irony here is absolutely delicious. Dan Orlovsky, the guy whose entire job is to evaluate quarterbacks, is getting publicly schooled on what real tangible talent actually looks like, all while still trying to lecture the audience on the nebulous concepts of potential and hype. Ryan Ryan Clark systematically dismantles the entire flawed logic that chronically undervalues elite players like Shedeur while simultaneously overvaluing mediocrity. And the audience watching Dan Orlovsky squirm under the bright studio lights knows it. It is beautiful, beautiful chaos. And this narrative extends far beyond just one single player or one single analyst. This is about the entire broken sports media system. Players like Shedeur Sanders are forced to face these kinds of uphill battles every single day, precisely because lazy narratives are so much easier to peddle than actual nuanced evaluation.
My analysis on Shedeur Sanders for the people that messaged me Uncle Tom or commented fool, I do want to say something to you sincerely from the bottom of my heart, and that's kiss my I'm not going to holler sabotage and racism when I don't truly believe something is sabotage and racism. I did have a problem with the way Shedeur Sanders was covered in the pre-draft process. The anonymous reports demeaning a young man's character who had never done anything wrong away from the field, had never shown anything but leadership.
Meanwhile, the analysts just desperately cling to their biases, to history, and to bloodlines, rather than giving credit where it is so obviously due. Ryan Clark just completely peeled back the curtain, exposing it all for the world to see. And the best part? He did it without even needing to have Shedeur's name front and center in the conversation. By so thoroughly exposing Dan Orlovsky, he exposed the bias, the absurdity, and the infuriating double standards that plague the entire system. Now let's talk about the immediate fallout. Dan Orlovsky pathetically tries to salvage some face by pointing to his physical measurables, to the GPS speed, or to whatever little vest he happens to be wearing that day. But Ryan Clark doesn't even flinch. You can't measure heart, you can't measure poise, and you certainly can't measure the ability to completely transform a program with a speedometer, he seems to imply. And you absolutely cannot justify calling someone generational after just 3 starts while simultaneously undermining a player who consistently dominates. That little vest joke wasn't just funny, it was a devastating career-defining blow. It perfectly summed up the sheer absurdity of letting analytics and hype completely overshadow actual tangible performance. Greatness doesn't negotiate, it doesn't rely on hype, and Shedeur Sanders is the living, breathing proof of that. He walks into a struggling program, he completely turns it around, he makes clutch plays, he earns the immediate respect of teammates who are older than him, and yet he still gets undervalued by the media. It is pure comedy gold. And then comes the real kicker. Ryan Clark points out the sheer absurdity of labeling anyone as generational after just 3 starts. Generational talent, by its very definition, dominates immediately. It forces a seismic change, and it leaves an impact that simply cannot be ignored. Caleb Williams, Trevor Lawrence, Lamar Jackson, they all did it.
So while Shedeur may not have had reps with the ones, what else do you want them to do in Cleveland? It's an opportunity for him. It may not be the ideal opportunity. Very rarely is it for a 5th round pick, but it's an opportunity for him to go out there and do in a game what many have reported he's done in practice. Stop with the setup to fail narrative.
And Shedeur Sanders, it is the exact same story. All the while, you have Dan Orlovsky just sitting there, measuring speed, completely and utterly missing the forest for the trees. The irony of it all is perfect. The comedy is perfect. And the sheer immeasurable frustration for anyone who is a real, genuine fan of the game, that is immeasurable. By the time the segment mercifully ends, you finally realize this was never just about Arch Manning or Shedeur Sanders, or even about Dan Orlovsky. No, this was about calling out an entire deeply flawed system. Analysts like Orlovsky are supposed to provide valuable insight, they are supposed to provide context, and they are supposed to provide an accurate and unbiased evaluation. Instead, they just perpetuate tired, lazy narratives, they hype up the unproven, and they actively undermine those who consistently prove themselves at the highest level. Ryan Clark completely dismantled that entire flimsy framework in one single glorious sitting, showing the entire world what happens when someone with actual credibility, with real-life experience, and with the undeniable truth on their side decides to hold up a mirror And the most satisfying part of it all, Ryan Clark didn't even need to shout. He didn't need to exaggerate beyond the bounds of reason. And Dan Orlovsky, well, he got a very public and very humbling lesson in just how flimsy his entire analytical framework really was. Watching this all unfold is a veritable masterclass in sports media accountability. It is also simultaneously pure comedy gold. The image of Dan Orlovsky trying to recover, stammering, desperately trying to explain away his numbers and his hype, all while Ryan Clark methodically and surgically exposes the flawed logic behind every single one of his arguments. It is like watching a slow-motion train wreck if the train itself was completely full of bad quarterback takes, and someone on the sidelines was just casually throwing truth grenades left and right.
What that means, multiple teams, 32 teams passed on him multiple times. And now you want me to say the one team that did decide to draft him doesn't have his best interests at heart. The thing is, he was a 5th round draft pick. 5th round draft picks get 5th round treatment, even if we don't feel like they deserve to be drafted in the 5th round. So you're gonna play with some guys who don't make the team. You know who else you're gonna play against? Some guys that don't make the team.
You cannot possibly look away. You desperately want to look away, but the sheer beautiful chaos of the moment is simply too satisfying to ignore. By the time Ryan Clark had finished his masterclass, Dan Orlovsky's professional credibility was not just damaged, it was in complete and utter shambles, and the audience knew it. Every single analyst, every fan, and everyone watching at home realized something absolutely critical in that moment. If you are relying on Dan Orlovsky to tell you who is elite and who isn't, you might as well just be flipping a coin. Real talent does not need hype. Real talent produces. Real talent forces recognition, and Shedeur Sanders, he is the living, breathing embodiment of that fundamental principle, and that is precisely why this single glorious on-air moment will now live forever in the annals of sports media lore. Ryan Clark held a mirror up to the entire broken system, and the reflection that stared back was brutal. It was hilarious, and it was deeply, profoundly satisfying. So the next time you hear an analyst mindlessly hyping up a 3-start quarterback while simultaneously downplaying someone who is consistently and demonstrably elite, remember this, remember the chaos, remember the little vest moment, and remember Ryan Clark systematically dismantling the credibility of a man who mistakenly thought he knew what he was talking about.
Oh, and this is just my opinion, it's time for Dion to let go a little bit, right? It's time for, if you're saying this about Shedeur, you get to say that now because I'm not his coach anymore. If Shedeur is dealing with this certain level of adversity, yeah, I'm on the phone with him. Yeah, I'm in his room and we're having conversations. But when he goes to work, he has to go to work as a man, right? Shedeur Sanders is going to be leading dudes that were like you in the league, that were like you, that were like me. At the time, you had kids and were married. I had kids and was married. Chan, you was a grown man that said, I could go in the streets every night and I could come in here and work.
And you must always remember, at the end of the day, the tape does not lie. The results do not lie. And true, undeniable talent will always, eventually, force its own recognition. Shedeur Sanders has definitively proven himself at every single level. He has transformed entire programs. He has made clutch, game-winning plays. He has earned the respect of his peers. And yet, he still faces these ridiculous, unfair narratives. The analysts like Dan Orlovsky, they will likely keep on hyping mediocrity, because that is what they do. But it is moments like this, moments of raw, unscripted truth, that serve as a powerful reminder to everyone of exactly why credibility and actual on-field performance will always matter more than empty hype, meaningless measurables, or a misplaced sense of nostalgia. And as for Dan Orlovsky himself, well, maybe he should invest in a sturdier vest next time, because the next time someone decides to actually hold you accountable for your takes, that little piece of fabric is not going to save you.